Let's look at the Testimonium Falvianum in context. This is the highly contested passage about Jesus from Josephus in his book, The Antiquity of the Jews. This passage comes from Book 18, containing the interval of 32 years from the banishment of Archelaus to the departure from Babylon. I want to read the entirety of chapter 3 so you can see the context of the Testimonium. Chapter 3 is titled, The Sedition of the Jews against Pontius Pilate concerning Christ and what befell Paulina and the Jews at Rome. But now Pilate, the procurator of Judea, removed the army from Caesarea to Jerusalem to take their winter quarters there in order to abolish the Jewish laws. So he introduced Caesar's effigies, which were upon the ensigns, and brought them into the city, whereas our law forbids us the very making of images. On which account the former procurators were wont to make their entry into the city with such ensigns as had not those ornaments. Pilate was the first who brought those images to Jerusalem and set them up there, which was done without the knowledge of the people, because it was done in the night time. But as soon as they knew it, they came in multitudes to Caesarea and interceded with Pilate many days that he would remove the images. And when he would not grant their request, because it would tend to the injury of Caesar, while yet they persevered in their request, on the 6th day he ordered his soldiers to have their weapons privately, while he came and sat upon his judgment seat, which seat was so prepared in the open place of the city that it concealed the army that lay ready to oppress them. And when the Jews petitioned him again, he gave a signal to the soldiers to encompass them routed, and threatened that their punishment should be no less than immediate death, unless they would leave off disturbing him, and go their ways home. But they threw themselves upon the ground, and laid their necks bare, and said they would take their death very willingly, rather than the wisdom of their laws should be transgressed. Upon which Pilate was deeply affected with their firm resolution to keep their laws inviolable, and presently commanded the images to be carried back from Jerusalem to Caesarea. Paragraph 2. But Pilate undertook to bring a current of water to Jerusalem, and did it with the sacred money, and derived the origin of the stream from the distance of 200 furlongs. However, the Jews were not pleased with what had been done about this water, and many 10,000s of the people got together and made a clamor against him, and insisted that he should leave off that design. Some of them also used reproaches and abused the man, as crowds of such people usually do. So he habited a great number of his soldiers in their habit, who carried daggers under their garments, and sent them to the place where they might surround them. So he bid the Jews himself go away, but they boldly casting reproaches upon him, he gave the soldiers that signal, which had been beforehand agreed on, who laid upon them much greater blows than Pilate had commanded them, and equally punished those that were tumultuous and those that were not. Nor did they spare them in the least, and since the people were unarmed, and were caught by men prepared for what they were about, there were a great number of them slain by this means, and others of them ran away wounded, and thus an end was put to this sedition. And now paragraph 3, the hotly disputed Testimonium Falvianum. Now there was about this time Jesus a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works. A teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure, he drew over to him both many Jews and many Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him. For he appeared to them alive again the 3rd day, as the divine prophets had foretold these and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. And the tribe of Christians so named from him are not extinct to this day. The words I have highlighted in yellow are almost certainly not the words of Josephus, and I think the entirety of paragraph 3 is completely added. But I will summarize my comments at the end of this video. Paragraph 4. About the same time, also another sad calamity put the Jews into disorder, and certain shameful practices happened about the temple of Isis that was in Rome. I will now first take notice of the wicked attempt about the temple of Isis, and will then give an account of the Jewish affairs. There was at Rome a woman whose name was Paulina, one who, on account of her dignity of her ancestors, and by the regular conduct of a virtuous life, had a great reputation. She was also very rich, and although she was of beautiful countenance, and in the flower of her age, wherein women are the most gay, yet did she lead a life of great modesty. She was married to Saturninus, one that was every way answerable to her in excellent character. Decius Mundus fell in love with this woman, who was a man very high in equestrian order, and as she was of too great dignity to be caught by presents, and had already rejected them, though they had been sent in great abundance, he was still more inflamed with love for her, insomuch that he promised to give her 200,000 Attic drachma for one night's lodging, and when this would not prevail upon her, he was not able to bear this misfortune in his amours. He thought it the best way to famish himself to death for want of food on account of Paulina's sad refusal, and he determined with himself to die after such a manner, and he went on with this purpose accordingly. Now Mundus had a freedwoman who had been made free by his father, whose name was Ide, one skillful in all sorts of mischief. This woman was very much grieved at the young man's resolution to kill himself, for he did not conceal his intentions to destroy himself from others, and came to him and encouraged him by her discourse, and made him to hope, by some promises she gave him, that he might obtain a night's lodging with Paulina. And when he joyfully hearkened to her entreaty, she said she wanted no more than 50,000 drachma for the entrapping of the woman. So when she had encouraged the young man, and gotten as much money as she required, she did not take the same methods as had been taken before, because she perceived that the woman was by no means to be tempted by money. But as she knew that she was very rich, given to the worship of the goddess Isis, she devised the following stratagem. She went to some of the Isis priests, and upon the strongest assurances of concealment, she persuaded them by words, but chiefly by the offer of money, of 25,000 drachma in hand, and as much more when the thing had taken effect, and told them the passion of the young man, and persuaded them to use all means possible to beguile the woman. So they were drawn in to promise so to do, by the large sum of gold they were to have. Accordingly, the oldest of them went immediately to Paulina, and upon his admittance he desired to speak with her by herself. When that was granted him, he told her that he was sent by the god Anubis, who had fallen in love with her, and enjoined her to come to him. Upon this she took the message very kindly, and valued herself greatly upon this condescension of Anubis, and told her husband that she had a message sent to her, and was to sup and lie with Anubis. So he agreed to her acceptance of the offer, as fully satisfied with the chastity of his wife. Accordingly she went to the temple, and after she had supped there, and it was the hour to go to sleep, the priest shut the door of the temple, when in the holy part of it the lights were put out. Then did Mundus leap out, for he was hidden therein, and did not fail of enjoying her, who was at his service all night long, as supposing he was the god. And when he was gone away, which was before those priests who knew nothing of the stratagem were stirring, Paulina came early to her husband, and told him how the god Anubis had appeared to her. Among her friends also she declared how great a value she put upon this favor, who partly disbelieved the thing when they reflected on its nature, and partly were amazed by it, as having no pretense for not believing it, when they considered the modesty and the dignity of the person. But now on the third day after what had been done, Mundus met Paulina, and said, Nay, Paulina, thou hast saved me 200,000 drachma, which sum thou sightest have added to thy own family, yet hast thou not failed to be at my service in the manner that I invited thee. As for the reproaches thou hast laid upon Mundus, I value not the business of names, but I rejoice in the pleasure I reaped by what I did, while I took to myself the name of Anubis. When he had said this, he went his way, but now she began to come to the sense of the grossness of what she had done, and rent her garments, and told her husband of the horrid nature of this wicked contrivance, and prayed him not to neglect to assist her in this case. So he discovered the fact to the emperor, whereupon Tiberius inquired into the matter thoroughly by examining the priests about it, and ordered them to be crucified, as well as Ide, who was the occasion of the perdition, and who had contrived the whole matter, which was so injurious to the woman. He also demolished the temple of Isis, and gave order that her statue should be thrown into the river Tiber, while he only banished Mundus, but did no more to him, because he supposed that what crime he had committed was done out of the passion of love. And these were the circumstances which concerned the temple of Isis, and the injuries occasioned by her priests. I now return to the relation of what happened about this time to the Jews at Rome, as I formerly told you I would. Paragraph 5. There was a man who was a Jew, but had been driven away from his own country by an accusation laid against him for transgressing their laws, and by the fear he was under for punishment of the same, but in all respects a wicked man. He, then living at Rome, professed to instruct men in the wisdom of the laws of Moses. He procured also 3 other men entirely of the same character as himself to be his partners. These men persuaded Fulvia, a woman of great dignity and one that had embraced the Jewish religion, to send purple and gold to the temple at Jerusalem. And when they had gotten them, they employed them for their own uses and spent the money themselves, on which account it was that they at first required it of her. Whereupon Tiberius, who had been informed of the thing by Saturninus, the husband of Fulvia, who desired inquiry might be made about it, ordered all the Jews to be banished out of Rome, at which time the consuls listed 4,000 men out of them, and sent them to the island Sardinia, but punished a greater number of them who were unwilling to become soldiers on account of keeping the laws of their forefathers. Thus were the Jews banished out of the city by the wickedness of 4 men. Book 18, chapter 3 has 5 paragraphs or 5 stories. The first story is about how Pilate brought objects of Roman worship to Jerusalem, but rather than kill all the Jews who were protesting, he decided to take those objects back to Caesarea. The second story is about how Pilate built an aqueduct to Jerusalem using the sacred Jewish money. But this time Pilate decided to kill all the Jews who protested. The third paragraph is not even a story, it's a simple statement that Jesus was the Christ who was resurrected 3 days after he was crucified. The fourth paragraph is a detailed story about how Mundus tricked Paulina into sleeping with him in the Isis temple. And the fifth and final paragraph is about how 4 greedy Jews got all Jews banished from Rome. Louis H. Feldman surveyed relevant literature in the 20th century in his book Josephus and Modern Scholarship. He concluded that 4 scholars thought the Testimonium Falvianum was authentic, while 35 thought it was manipulated in some way, and 13 thought it was completely unreliable. It is my conclusion that no honest person will accept the Testimonium Falvianum as an unadulterated, authentic text.